Dan Abbott. I'm making this video actually evaluating a student project at Southern Maine Community College, and I want to use this to point out something that a lot of people who use AutoCAD do not realize, and that is placing dimensions where it looks like dimension aligned would work, but it doesn't. And I'm going to show you why it doesn't and what you should be doing instead. And while I'm at it, I think I'll point out a couple of other things that I do when I'm evaluating student work. First thing I do is a preview when somebody turns something in. Everything has to be set up so it can be plotted. When you do a preview, it shows you what it would look like plotted. So I realize that that viewport is showing. I want that on a layer that is non-plot. Text height for the title is not the right text height. The hatch pattern is too thick. It should be thin lines. The annotation should always be thin. It does not break around the dimension, which it should, and sometimes doesn't in AutoCAD, even if you do everything correctly. And we have a couple of dimensions that look a little bit funny, and one of them, like 25, doesn't go all the way up in. There's also one other thing here. There should be a line extending off of here for the back of that. So the issue involving this right here is this. If you said, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to take that dimension, I'm going to put this where it goes. You see what the student did was they used DIMALIGNED to put that in because they didn't realize that whenever you, and I think probably all of these are DIMALIGNED. Yeah, you see, so instead of coming down here, which is really what you'd want to do for the dimension, the same thing with that one. And that probably is also the same thing here, yeah. DIMALIGNED only works if the 2 points you pick line up in the same angle that you want your dimension to be. So we have an auxiliary view here that's rotated at 30 degrees. That means we need a dimension that's rotated at 30 degrees. So one thing I do is have students ignore the AutoCAD awful center mark that they added and just use the dim center command to place their center mark so they can do things like eliminate that extension line. Now instead of DIMALIGNED, we're going to use a DIMLINEAR dimension. So we'll say the distance from, say, here to here. Now it doesn't look like you can put that in there until you notice that there are a number of options here, including rotated. If you rotate that 30 degrees, and you can do that, by the way, just by picking 2 points. Now you'll notice this is lined up at 30 degrees, but it gives you the correct dimension. So you put that here, and now you have an extension line that just extends after the crosshair without a break in it, which is what you don't want. Go back and do another DIMALIGNED, go from here to here. Again, it doesn't look like it's going to work, but that's because she hadn't noticed that there were these options. You go to rotate, and again, you can type in 30 degrees if you know it's 30, but you can just pick 2 points. And now it comes out, you got exactly the right dimension, and it's lined up with this angle, which is 30 degrees. Now, as far as the hatch pattern goes, that just got put on a layer, and I think probably what happened was a layer was created while the object layer was current, and it just took on the characteristics for line weight of that layer. So if we go to hatch, your line types and line weights, the line weights are supposed to be twice as thick for thick lines as they are for thin lines. So since she's using 0.4, 0.2 would be the appropriate size for that. And now that, when you do a preview, looks much better because it's nice thin lines, but it still doesn't break around the dimension. So there are 2 possibilities here when you want to do this, and one of them is to place the hatch pattern at the end. You don't want to put hatch patterns in at all until you're all done so that it has a chance to break around, but it's possible, and I'll show you. Tell you something that is probably what happened here, and this is an AutoCAD glitch. Let's put this other line in. So we're going to project that line down. Hang on, I want to track using all polar angle settings, not just, there we go. So we'll track off of that point, come down, and we'll put that line in from here to here. And we'll match the properties of the object line to it. So it's an object line. So now that's the boundary that I want. Now if I put a hatch pattern in here, NZ31, pick the 2 points, you notice it breaks right around. And sometimes it'll stay broken in AutoCAD when you pick something else, and sometimes it goes right through. You notice in this case, it does break around. So we do a preview now, and now you can read the dimension. It breaks. It's nice and thin. The dimensions are lined up correctly because it was dim linear instead of dim aligned. And the only thing I'd say now is that you have this problem when you go to an arc, you go to a place where there's an arc, that it doesn't appear that you have a gap, even though you really do, because it takes a while before that space shows up. So in a case like this, if you want this to be done correctly, which of course you do if you're in one of our classes, you can just drag that out like that after you place the dimension. So now you don't have a break here that's not supposed to be there. You have a gap here, a visual gap that you can see, and the dimensions you put in are rotated to the angle you want them rotated. The hatch pattern flows around the dimension, and it stops right there. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm just going to do undo back to the beginning here. Everything's been undone. Pardon me. And I'm just going to go and show you what you can do to have that break after the fact. If I go and pick the hatch pattern, now I'm in the hatch edit option, not normally where you're in home. You have to really know what you're doing here, and it helps if you've been using the software a long time, because the hatch pattern now, all the controls are up here. But if you see any of the controls in the ribbon that have a little teeny arrow like that, that means, hey, there's a whole bunch of other cool things if you do this. And when you do it, it opens up an entirely new dialog box, which normally opens like this. Now when you open it like this, it's got some options. Over here, it's got a lot more options. What we're going to do is say we want to add a selected object. So when it says add the selected object and you come down and pick that object right there, you can add in the dimension to the hatch pattern that you're editing, and usually, not always, usually it will, see if I can get that. When you do that, usually it will now break around just like it did there. So now when you do the preview, it looks like this. Now she's using yellow just to get it out of the way, and you notice it's thick again because I went back to the beginning. So you got two choices with a hatch pattern. Place a hatch pattern after everything else is done, but even then, AutoCAD on occasion will not flow around a dimension. It does usually, or about half the time. Sometimes it doesn't. But you can almost always solve it by adding the dimension to the hatch selection set. By selecting the hatch, opening up with that little teeny arrow, this, and then saying I want to add something. Pick the thing you want to add, press enter, pick OK. Yeah, and there it goes. It does flow around after the fact. That usually works. Sometimes you have to just delete the whole pattern and put it in again. Yeah, so the main purpose of this little video is for me to put something on YouTube that discusses the use of dim linear in a situation where the dimension has to be rotated, and why when people use dim aligned they don't get the right result. Make a point of that. If I had used dim aligned on this and said I want to go from here, and then you pick this point down here, you notice what it gives you is the wrong dimension. It's too long, and it lines up directly between the 2 points. That's why dim aligned is almost very seldom is dim aligned the right choice when you're dimensioning anything with any kind of complexity, especially when you have auxiliary views where things are rotated at different angles.